Honorable members, order.
Switch on the microphone. Switch on the microphone. We're rising on a point of order.
On a point of order.
The microphones must be on.
Welcome to Politics Unmuted, where our microphones are never muted and we turn up the volume on all things political. I'm Coletta Hunter, the politics editor for News 24.
My name is Pieter du Toit, I'm assistant editor for In-Depth News.
And I'm Lisa Gatandwa, the politics reporter.
The band has been reunited. Where were you, Peter?
I was in KwaZulu-Natal last week, Conita. It was good fun on the south coast. And it's always good to drive through your country to see what's going on, to see rural areas, to drive through cities that you never get to. So it was a good break, but now we're back.
But one important question, how much of sleep did you have last night?
And as we're recording this, it's on the day of the election. Not a lot. I slept a couple of hours over midnight, the midnight hours, but I was up for most of the time. Lots of Red Bull and Milo.
I was driving here to the studio and you have this outer body experience when you're so exhausted, yes. Your knees start shaking, but the nerves, it's Wednesday, there's still no winner of the US election. It has been a riveting evening. Liz, did you stay up?
No, I slept through.
Oh, girl.
I slept
I think because Liz has got some serious issues in our local politics, Liz.
You're like, true. I have my own issues to deal with.
I couldn't.
Those people across the pond can sort themselves out.
Exactly.
But it's fascinating, right? What's going on there?
It has been fascinating, and look, the results, the exact results are one thing, but what I've found fascinating is looking at their electoral system. What it means for democracy, what it means for the world. For progressive politics, for decency, for multilateralism, but also our country. We've had our own battles with systems, with institutions. And seeing what's been happening there has been fascinating to watch. The electoral system there, it's very odd. We're used to an independent electoral commission that collates all the results from all the provinces and all the voting districts. Over there, it's totally different. You've got every state running their own election system. It's not being fed into a central repository of results. So that's been fascinating to see. And I'm wondering whether that opens it up to manipulation or inaccuracies, and given the polarization in that country, surely it's something that country can learn from countries like ourselves.
So let's take a step back, Peter, and everything you've said I want us to unpack, but just to the fact that there's this attention on the US election, and rightfully so, but what does it have to say about US exceptionalism, this thing of US is, the whole world is focusing on this election. Why do you think it is?
Well, the one thing you speak about exceptionalism, no one's exceptional. That's the one thing that we need to understand. Yes, the US is one of the oldest.
They create this facade that it's just the beacon of democracy.
Look, the fathers of democracy.
They are one of the oldest functioning democracies. Right. That's true. There hasn't been. They've had a major civil war in the 1860s, but after that, there's been peaceful transition of power every single election, and that's something that the whole world has looked up. But I think what's happened over the last couple of years, and we've seen that in Europe and elsewhere in the world, is a strong polarization between different ideologies and different political philosophies, and that's definitely entrenched there. So no one's exceptional, and the US certainly is not immune to the type of political conflict that we've seen elsewhere.
But there was theatre and spectre, right?
Yeah, well, what I could see of it, but
between you
when I was still awake. But Peter is right, and I think the bedrock of any democracy is its election process, and which must not only be fair, but it must also be seen to be fair and legitimate. And Donald Trump calling into question the fairness and the legitimacy of these elections kind of undermines the democracy in that country, and we've seen that happening in so many countries here in Africa. But it's just very interesting when it happens in that particular space in the first world countries. So it's going to be interesting to see whether America or what the US survives this kind of onslaught in its democracy. They've had issues in terms of how they've looked at or how they have responded to COVID, how they've responded to the Black Lives Matter movement, and how they've responded to the presidency being hell-bent on ensuring that they win no matter what. So I don't know. I'm very reluctant to say that America is still as entrenched in that democracy, and it still has that fierce democratic, help me with the word,
culture, or you know. But and I want to add to that, Liz, to what you're saying now. It seems like the campaigning by Trump and the Republicans and people in that orbit, the way that they've demonized opposition, the way that they've demonized the system, the electoral system, the way that they've attacked their political opponents, the way that they've used disinformation, seems to have been very successful. And that, I think, Liz, what you're saying, they're not, I don't think that they're this beacon of democracy anymore, because that's been successful. The way that Trump has attacked Biden it's worked in Florida. He's a socialist, he's a communist, he's going to take away your freedoms. That seems to have worked, especially among Cuban Americans who have this fear of communism given their history with Fidel Castro.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's very reminiscent. I feel like, it's sort of out of the playbook of your Erdogan's, that kind of newfound, there's democratic dictators that, what if you will, and I think that they almost have sort of a one size fit all, how to discredit your opposition, how to undermine processes, discredit something that you are participating in and would be a beneficiary of actually. So, and if it doesn't suit you, then you're able to wash your hands of it. But if it suits you, then it's fine. Then you're the elected president. And I think that, if anything, before we go into the discussion around the glaring holes in the system, I think it's a lesson for the world, right, on democracy. I think this is a moment of reckoning, and I think democracy might be at risk, right?
I think you're right, and I think what we should take note of is, if you're a Democrat, if you're a constitutionalist, if you believe in the rule of law and in a constitution that's sacrosanct, you need to acknowledge institutions and conventions and systems that are designed to strengthen democracy.
Otherwise, it's a free-for-all.
Including the opposition.
Yeah.
So if you are hell-bent on discrediting the opposition to such a degree that it becomes this intense conflict where you can't see a bridge between the two, then democracy is at risk, because then the system is at risk. The same with the media. The media has a very specific role to play, and obviously the media is not blameless, and we're not perfect, and we talk about our colleagues in the United States, but the media has a specific role to play in a democracy as well. And if you undermine every single thing, what's going to be left? What's left standing? And I think that puts your own victory, if you win, into question as well.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Years ago, Trevor Noah made that joke that Trump reminds him of an African dictator, and really it's the playbook of you can pick a dictator across the continent.
Yeah.
It looks very familiar, every time, especially watching Trump giving that press conference where he announced that they're going to contest to the Supreme Court the counting of mail-in votes, and this is the demeanor, and I'm like, this is a good old Gaddafi, this is this is something that the world has seen and shunned, and now you're getting it manifested in different ways.
I'm just thinking, I'll go back to Peter's point about how undermining institutions, it undermines and impedes on democracy. I'm just thinking far back during the Zuma years, when the Chapter 9 institution of the Public Protector was one that would be undermined so many times in Parliament, or by parliamentarians, or by ANC leaders, and how that in itself was, a shock to the system in terms of it was. We still had our democracy is very fragile and still very young, and how we were able to rail that in as South Africans, and if you look at where America is, and it worries me that we have similar traits. We've seen that we can get to that position, and I'm just worried if the examples that we've seen in America, is it something that we could possibly be threading
And what's worrying about that is that there's an inability to pull back from the brink. It seems like there's an inability by American voters, the American public, American society, and their leaders to pull back and say, look, is this the direction that we want our country and democracy
or
to
like
go?
the greater good,
Yes.
or
Because
it was
if,
like a ceasefire of political.
or just looking beyond the horizon a little bit, just stepping a little just giving one step away from your own self-interest to say, what's good for the country. So I need to give way somewhere. Give your opponent something just to bring people back together again. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, who in 2011, I think, or 2010 or 2009 said, the Republicans' single most important job is to make sure that Obama is a single-term president, and has been the most obstructive force in U.S. politics. When he won on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning somewhere, it blurs into one, he was on the offensive again, saying we need to take America back from the rabid leftists. That's not the way.
But that's boogeyman politics
Exactly.
of America, right?
But are we seeing it here as well? Are we seeing it elsewhere in the world too?
So the thing is, right, there was this bizarre question, is that, how did Trump even get elected in the first place? And then I thought about it, and I thought, if we rewind 10 years, there was a man facing rape charges, corruption charges, becomes president, and then becomes president for a second term after squandering, the first term. And so we've been through it in the form of Jacob Zuma. So the question is to Americans, is like, how does this happen? And we almost know how this happens. Populism. We've come from that Jacob Zuma playbook.
We've seen the rise of populist politics
Yeah.
everywhere. We've
Yeah.
seen it in Europe. We've seen it in Germany. We've seen it in France. We've seen it in the Netherlands. We've seen Brexit. Obviously, Trump was not an outlier in 2016. We're seeing it in this country. There's populist politics being played every time. The EFF are past masters at playing populist politics. It means it's soundbite politics. There's not a lot of substance to what politicians are telling their audiences. And in the US, whatever Trump says, his supporters lap it up. And almost unflinchingly and unquestioningly so.
And we've also seen how populism, it's got such the rise, the trajectory of where it's going. We can see with how blindly EFF supporters follow Julius Malema. Whatever he says goes. And that seems to be the way that Trump followers support him. I was watching one of the Daily Show little segments on a Donald Trump campaign rally, and they were speaking to some of the Trump supporters, and I was just shocked at how blindly these people follow him without any reference to how he has been leading in the past 4 years. And that's scary.
It's the same, when you look at blind supporters of like Putin or Bashar al-Assad. It's the nature of humankind. Mystery will yet to solve. But the thing is that in the face of populism, you have systems to keep the house up, right? So in South Africa, in the era of the state capture, we had the media, we had the courts, we had Chapter 9 civil society, right? So that literally our state was being pulled out of the foundation and crumbled at every turn, but there was these pillars that's against the odds kept things up. And so what happens then when that gets chipped away? Because it does get chipped away, right?
Over time, that erosion, it's like a building where there's a seeping of water into the foundations, and that starts eating away at the steel girders that keep up a pillar. Over time, it weakens that pillar. Let's give the US some credit, though, that they still have strong institutions. The media still plays an extremely critical role, as our media played in this country over the course of the last decade. So it's not as if they're about to collapse. But what is happening is that erosion is gathering pace, Juanita, I think. 2016, 2020, there doesn't seem to be a softening of any of these sides. In fact, there seems to be a hardening and a greater polarization, which means that those institutions, when you've got someone like Trump in control, and Trump is destructive, let's be honest about it, he's certainly not fit to lead the most modern economy and the most modern democracy on the face of the earth. He is not fit to be the custodian of the country's morals and values, and he's shown that. But we need to ask the question, what then attracts people to him? What was it in his message that made him get so many votes? And that's something that's going to take a long time to understand.
Is it not that he appealed to people's fears?
Base instincts, eh?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose we long past that, because that was a conversation of 2016. But I mean, we've been through the last 4 years, and you would think people would have. But I do think it's that red blue politics that you either hear, you hear and you hate whatever's on that side, whatever it stands for. And we were saying earlier, Liz, that there isn't just sort of level-headed politics in the sense that I agree on this issue, I disagree. You could have that sort of mature democracy. It's like you red or you blue. And I think that it doesn't serve democracy well, right?
I would like to see in the Americans, I don't know, maybe I'm just being a dreamer, but I would like to see more independence, not your Kanye West, but more independent candidates come up. Maybe that would, I don't know, shake things up.
So definitely there's a conversation around US systems and this electoral process. We'll talk about it in a second. But, I find it very interesting, to read a quote of the former now deceased Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said that if you want to draft a constitution in today's era, do not look at the US Constitution. And she said, I might look at the Constitution of South Africa. And I thought that was very cool. So Ginsburg continued, she says, there was a deliberate attempt to have a fundamental instrument of government that embraced basic human rights, had an independent judiciary. It really is, I think, a great piece of work that was done, much more recent than the US Constitution. And so the entire electoral system of having a popular vote and an electoral college is what is at the center. Obviously, 2016, it became more prominent. And now again, that debate has resurfaced.
Yeah.
How does Americans? How do they fix it?
I don't think there is a way to fix it. I think the Americans are extremely reluctant to make fundamental changes to their electoral system. I mean, the Electoral College has been the way that they've elected presidents for 150 years. The criticism of the Electoral College is not new. Criticism of how the Supreme Court functions is not new. But it changes depending on who is in government.
Yeah. So if it's a level-headed Obama, it's okay.
And when it's a maniacal Trump, then it's not okay for the other side. So it's very partisan in that sense. And that's why Constitution is so important. In a piece in the New York Times this week, a governance expert from a prominent university in the States, and I forget his name, also cited South Africa's term limits for justices of the Constitutional Court as possibly a way to go. Because if you're a judge in the Supreme Court, that's for life, or until you decide to. But in this country, there's a term limit, 12 years. Yeah. And remember, our justices of the Constitutional Court are extremely well remunerated, so that they aren't influenced by any outside, and they're remunerated for the rest of their life. So to insulate them from, and it seems that system is not working efficiently in that country. If there's going to be long court challenges in the United States after this election, it's going to be heard by a court populated by judges who are in essence political appointees. It's crazy to realize that often judgeships in the US are voted for by voters. I mean, it's imagine you live in Gauteng or in Pretoria and surrounds, and there's an election. Yes, you can vote for the. I mean,
the judge president.
I'm struggling to get my head around that because it's not democratic, and it doesn't ensure the independence of the judiciary, and surely that's a cornerstone of a functioning democracy.
But doesn't that make you sad that we have this amazing constitution and we could be so much better than what we are? Am I getting too deep?
Yeah, no. I mean, you're right. Yes, it does. I mean, we could be so much better off than we are.
Because we have everything we need. We have a good constitution. We have good systems. We have...
But when you work with people and humans and human instincts, the weakest link in a chain is a problem.
But, I mean, Liz, come in here with some hope for us. Please.
I have no hope.
She who slept through the American vote, is like, there's no hope. Our systems mean nothing. I like to think our systems stand for something, and I sound like a broken record, and I say that we would have been far worse off as a result of the state capture era, had we not have
Yes.
the systems in place. And the thing is that what worries me about South Africa is disenfranchisement, not through active blocking of people voting, but just through disillusionment. And I think that South Africa in the last election and upcoming by-elections, local government election will be something to watch, is how many people actually show up to vote. And I think probably that was maybe the turning point in the US this election, where there was this huge mobilization sustained for people to go out and vote. And my concern and my real worry about South Africa is that you're going to have a level of disillusionment when you look at the reports of corruption, how systemic it is, how widespread it is, how no political party is spared a conflict or a corruption scandal. And then you almost get to a point where you're worried that my generation, not you guys' generation, my younger generation, will just reach a point where we don't care anymore.
And that's been look. So the US election, it's the biggest turnout in 100 years.
Yeah.
Why has there been a big turnout? Because the campaigns have both been effective.
Yeah.
Trump has painted his opponent as part of the crazy left, socialists. You need to defend America, and Biden has obviously attacked Trump for being unqualified, for being bombastic and being a demagogic leader. So that got both of their bases out to vote. We probably going to have to need to accept that this is the way that US society is moving in, and let's try to understand what's happening there. As far as our own politics are concerned, I mean, obviously there's a big opportunity for opposition parties, Juanita and Liz, and you guys work in the trenches as political reporters, to try and get out their supporters by framing the ANC as corrupt and inept, which they are at the moment. But do they have the skill and the nous and the subtlety and the conviction to try and do that, to get out their voters in? Because next year, you remember 2016 was a dramatic election. They lost Nelson Mandela Bay, Joburg and Tshwane. Is it going to happen the same time? I'm not seeing those trends at the moment.
So as we wrap up, there's just one topic that's on my mind, and that is, America's relation to the rest of the world. And under Trump, we saw this sort of move towards, putting the US first, making America great again under that slogan. But more importantly, the shift away from multilateralism.
Greater isolationism.
Isolationism, of course. And the thing is that we, South Africans, are mostly affected by that type of politics.
Yes.
And the thing is, for me, it sort of gives us an opportunity almost as South Africa, maybe as a leader in the continent, to sort ourselves out, to fill a vacuum of sorts. And I don't know if I'm being too ambitious, but I do think that South Africa has done great work in terms of supporting and protecting multilateralism, and we bear the fruit of it, right? And so it gives us an opportunity. This landscape gives us an opportunity to sort of assert ourselves in the world, starting maybe the African Union. You're smiling at me. I think I'm just saying, ambitious.
No, I'm not saying you're ambitious at all. But that presupposes that we've got a coherent foreign policy.
I mean, Peter, I'm not taking away from the fact that we don't have the economic prowess of the United States, but I'm saying there is a vacuum, right?
No, you're right. I think you're right. It does present opportunities, but equally so, I think it does present danger. I think the fear that I have of 4 more years of Donald Trump style politics, and his Trumpism will become entrenched over the next couple of years, is that you might see the unraveling of the post World War II global consensus of keeping
an agreed system.
Yes, an agreed system with conventions and organizations and institutions and relationships between countries, which kept the world stable for 70 years. I mean, in the first half of the previous century, we had 2 major global conflicts. And after World War II, there was consensus that, we need to prevent an enormous...
As flawed as that was.
But it kept the peace.
Somewhat.
And to be honest, it also helped create the most wealth that the world has ever seen, as imperfect as it was. So we might see the unraveling, the rise of China, the rise of Russia, the UK that have now exited Europe, tension in Europe, the US being very aggressive towards certain countries as well, embracing Turkey, North Korea, Russia, the trade conflicts with China, you would see increased global instability, I think, as much as there's opportunity for South Africa on the continent.
But the reality of that is that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It spills over to us, and we feel it, and
Yes.
and Africa,
Yes.
as it were, would feel it the hardest.
So then, how do you manage that personality as leaders of different countries? I mean, how
You
do
sort
how do
out
we?
your stuff at home. You get your house in order.
Which we're struggling with, but the problem with with the US now, that has been the world's leading superpower for so many years. I mean, Trump calls Africa a shithole place. He's derided Mandela as corrupt. He said that. So that's his view of Africa and South Africa. So that means we're not going to be able to rely on the US for support anytime soon. Which means our country will look towards the east, like we've done, like you very well know. China's going to come back into play very strongly. Their influence in Africa is going to come through very strongly. So it's going to change the balance of power, guys.
I think that there's going to be a lot of cleaning up to do in the US post this election. I think that it has to find itself. I think that it has to search for its soul in the as it licks its wounds, whichever way it turns out. Liz, any final words?
Well, I'm interested to see what's going to happen after the elections, whoever wins, whether it be Biden or Trump, and whether they will come with an ANC sort of like program.
Unity. They need a Didi
unity
Mabuza.
of a United States. It's going to be interesting in how the United States also relates to South Africa, and it will be interesting in how we relate to the States moving forward.
But it doesn't serve American politics, right, Peter, to have that united. It doesn't serve the fundamental core of US politics to have this sort of unity of purpose.
And it doesn't look like anyone wants that either.
Yeah.
And you said a moment ago that the US needs to find itself, needs to search for itself. Maybe it has found itself.
And this is it.
Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what they are. I don't think it's a pretty picture.
That's all we have for you today. From all of us at Politics Unmuted, thanks for listening. This episode was produced by my colleague Catherine Rice and recorded by Shante Schatz. The music has been courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or follow the hashtag Politics Unmuted.